Conservative Americans clear up to Congress are outraged at Colorado State University today. That outrage is understandable until you add facts and context. The website Liberty Unyielding claims CSU banned the words America and American. There's even a scary-looking stock photo of Antifa that I think was taken in Philadelphia. Republican Congressman Doug Lamborn of Colorado Springs tweeted his outrage. He even tagged the president, trying to get him to pile on the Rams. Lamborn claimed that a CSU task force decided the word America is so offensive it should not be spoken. Which is weird, because if you search CSU's website for the word America, you get 84,000 results. Our Sonia Gutierrez explains how confusion got ginned up into outrage.
The Inclusive Language Guide was created late last year.
It was a request from faculty and staff for faculty and staff to be used internally and really to serve as a resource.
It's not a requirement, not an official policy. Mary Ontiveros, Vice President for Diversity at CSU, says this was just a guide.
There were a number of items that came up, and that's why they had a number of different drafts.
One of those drafts included the word America and American as a word to avoid.
It was just a note that when you're talking about America, some people don't automatically think of the United States of America.
Basically saying that for some people, America encompasses more than just the United States. Like South America, Central America.
It has nothing to do with not using America.
But they still decided to keep the word America out of the guide because it would be too confusing.
It just resurfaced because somebody found the draft.
And the backlash hasn't stopped since.
People were not happy. In fact, people were pretty vile about it.
Set the record straight. Why was America included and why was it taken it out?
It was included along with other words. I mean, just in a brainstorming session, you know how these things work. And so that happened to be one of the words that was included. And then they had an opportunity to talk it through and made a decision, and a very conscious decision. No, this is not the time to do that.
While she's surprised she's just hearing about it now.
Oh, I know. Isn't that fascinating?
She's not surprised to see that language has once again stirred up emotions for a whole new conversation.
It really speaks to the importance of language, right? And we want to make sure that we are inclusive, but at the same time, we want to use best practices.
For Next, I'm Sonia Gutierrez.
CSU thinks the draft version of this was accidentally posted online by a faculty member. That's how it got rolling. You can see the draft version and the current version of the suggested inclusive language guides on 9news.com. CDOT is reaching into its pocket. It's reaching into our pockets for $20 million to fix US 36. Whether taxpayers get repaid depends on who ends up getting blamed for the failure of the highway near Church Ranch. Today, for the first time, we heard about fat clay. That is not a person. That would be horrible. It's geology. Here's Marshall Zellinger.
You know that feeling when everything just drops? Well, US 36 looks like it needs Pepto-Bismol. It's still dropping an inch per hour, down 10 to 12 feet since the damage was first noticed late last week.
About 50 feet away from us, the contractor, the designer, the CDOT team, including maintenance and engineering and construction, are all in a room figuring out what the solution is and what the time frame is.
At today's monthly CDOT Transportation Commission meeting, the board got an update on the failure of US 36 in the form of a geology lesson from Chief Engineer Josh Lapley.
It's fat clay, which means fat clay really likes water, and clay holds together and actually can serve with some bearing capacity that you can set stuff on top of when it's not wet. When it gets wet, cohesion goes away and things fail.
Yet CDOT does not feel fat clay is a danger on the westbound side of the highway or any other stretch of US 36.
We are monitoring that other side. We don't anticipate, nor have we seen any settlement on that side. No, there aren't any other areas that specifically we want to go out and test. But yes, we're always worried about segments all over the entire state because failures happen.
At 2:30 this afternoon, it took us 6 minutes to get 1 mile from Wadsworth to Church Ranch. Traffic that just gets worse later in the day. Getting 2 lanes of traffic plus a toll lane on this stretch of US 36 won't take as long as you might think. Getting the separation of Church and Ranch to look pretty again, it'll take some time.
What's your level of fixing it? Getting traffic back on it, that's a certain time period, and then getting it to where we've got the panels back up and everything looks good. There's a difference to me of that operational functionality, weeks.
Back to that $20 million. It came from a piggy bank that the CDOT Commission controls. In 2013, we dipped deep into that piggy bank because of flood damage to so many state roads. The federal government paid us back for that. Federal government is not going to pay us back for this. The only way we'll likely get paid back this time is if CDOT can prove someone else is to blame for what happened, Kyle.
As we look for bright spots in this, RTD is having a difficult time getting people to ride its services, and I imagine they had tons of people on those buses getting around the closure.
CDOT got RTD to offer that Flatiron Flyer for free on Monday and Tuesday, and as part of the meeting today, the commission approved $140,000 in reimbursement to RTD. The only question I have is, was that for actual ridership or just the best case scenario if every bus was full for those full 2 days? But
we don't know that. We don't have an answer on that yet?
Not yet.
Good thing we got a show tomorrow. All right, thank you, Marshall. Republican Senator Cory Gardner finally got back to us days after we asked him about President Trump's racist tweets. You know, the ones telling Congresswomen of color they should go back to their home countries. Gardner's spokeswoman today directed us to a radio interview that the senator did on the subject, a radio interview where he said he wouldn't have sent those tweets. I have noted that Senator Gardner is spending a lot of his time in his safe spaces, talk radio. I had nothing wrong with doing interviews there for sure, but at some point, Gardner's going to need to venture out and face questions from journalists. And when questions are ignored or shrugged off, they don't go away, they just pile up. Every week Senator Gardner spends in his safe spaces just leaves him with a bigger pile to shovel eventually.
Our next question comes from a viewer named Helen. She'd been seeing some job ads online that requested photos of applicants. Helen said, "That got me wondering, is this a form of discrimination on labor laws?"
So Helen, we called the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission for you today. EEOC says that under Title VII and Title VIII in the law, it's actually not illegal for an employer to ask for a photo. Now, that being said, the EEOC said they would question why an employer wants your photo in the first place. Comes off like they're fishing for a specific candidate. Now, under the Americans with Disabilities Act, an employer could get into trouble if they ask for a photo because that photo could reveal if someone has a medical condition, and that would violate the law. Today I spotted some people riding scooters in Denver, not those people. The ones that I saw were wearing neon bikinis and holding drinks in plastic cups. So pretty much peak Denver, I think. And today we learned that the dockless scooters will stay forever. Denver's Public Works says the pilot program, supposed to wrap up the end of the month, is being extended through August, and that's just to get them to the permanent program, which will start in September. Denver Mayor Michael Hancock still has not met face-to-face with his worst nightmare on City Council. New City Councilwoman Candy Citabacca and the mayor do not agree on very much, including on when they can meet. The mayor has met with all of the other new City Council members. Those new faces, including Citabacca, sat down with us this week, and we asked them what advice are they giving the mayor in these one-on-one meetings as Mayor Hancock heads into his final term. While the new council members largely agree with one another on issues like affordable housing and slowing down development, they had differing words of advice for the mayor.
My piece of advice would be to recognize that this council is going to be very different.
Be bold and try really innovative things.
I think it would be very wise for him to make sure that he fulfills the promises he made during this final campaign trail.
There are a lot of people who feel like their voices have not been heard by this administration, and so don't forget the little people who go to work every day and work really hard to make our city great.
I'm really excited to work with the mayor. My piece of advice is that we're not going to be pushovers.
We have the full interview with the 5 new Denver City Council members posted on the next YouTube page.
And I saw it all over the news, like opioid addiction was such a big thing.
So a 13-year-old Coloradan did what she does. She invented something that might help.
So I'm pretty much automating an immunosorbent testing method.
I'm going to let her explain how that works. 50 years later, one man is still looking up to the astronauts who set foot on the moon.
I was so young when I lost my father. You look for role models, and that's what these guys were.
Those guys became family. That's next.
All 3 years Next has been on the air, we have been searching for the smartest kid in Colorado. Tonight, our second appearance in the series. Gitanjali Rao was featured on Next and on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon for inventing a device that detects lead in water. Now she's up to something new. 2 inventions by the age of 13. The 8th grader from Lone Tree has created technology to help physicians diagnose opioid addiction sooner.
So this is my device. It's called Epione, and it's a tool to diagnose opioid addiction at an early stage. So we had family friends who got into an accident, a car accident, and one of the parents ended up getting prescribed opioids for back pain, and they got more addicted to it without even knowing it. And it's scary to think that by the time you know you're addicted, it's too late to do anything about it. So my goal was to create something which would diagnose opioid addiction at an early stage. So it's based on variations in a protein produced by a certain gene in our body that's related to addiction. There's just a gene in all of our bodies, but when we take more opioids than we can actually take in, those opioids go and bind to that gene, and it produces even more protein than before. So at the end, based on how much protein that gene produces, it's going to turn a darker shade of orange. So then I'd put this into the device, and the device would take a picture of it, and based on that, it's going to put it on that scale and tell you, what status of addiction you have. I guess the goal for this is to necessarily be something that the physician screens the patient before they prescribe them a drug, just to make sure they're not already on something, and to make sure, they're healthy and doing well. I'm hopefully creating something to make the world a better place, and I'm really, really looking forward to developing this device further.
Gitanjali's receiving a $7,500 scholarship from TCS, a consulting company, to help her roll out that latest invention.
What a day. 99 officially out at DIA. That ties our record. Last set back in 1998, and tomorrow we'll do it all over again with all this sunshine. Bright and blue across downtown Denver at the 6 o'clock hour. Not really anything going on HD Doppler 9. It's been pretty quiet. A dry day and a windy one up in the high country. Tonight, mostly clear skies. We're down to about 66. Should be mild across the plains. 40s, 50s going way up high. High pressure is around. You know the drill. This is going to keep us pretty toasty around here. And then as we look ahead toward the weekend, we start to see that jet stream just dip a bit, and that means a little cool off coming our way. Triple-digit temperatures coming in our direction once again tomorrow. Mostly sunny skies, but I think we should just be shy of that record. We stay in the triple digits across the eastern plains tomorrow with 70s and 80s up in the mountains. So if you're trying to find a spot to cool off, that's going to be the place to go. 80s as we head towards Saturday and Sunday, also bringing back a chance for a few scattered thunderstorms, and that will continue into next week.
They were the first astronauts on the moon. For this Coloradan, they were also family.
My heart is full because of the sacrifice and time they gave me.
Ed Givens talks about growing up with legends.
This way was Neil Armstrong. Down the street was Charlie Duke, Jack Lausma, Michael Collins lived around the corner.
That's next.
As the world talks about the Apollo moon landing this week, you will hear the men and women of that mission described as brilliant, and they certainly were. A man from Colorado Springs told our Steve Steger that they were also much more than that.
I think of all those guys as really modern day Christopher Columbuses.
All these years later, Ed Givens still looks at these guys in awe.
And they did it all through math, and it was just that next frontier that was unexplored, and it was the patriotic thing to do.
Though admittedly, one Apollo astronaut was his favorite.
Became a fighter pilot, went to test pilot school, and then was selected to be an Apollo astronaut.
A man he hardly got the chance to know, his father.
They were all, workaholics. They were under a lot of pressure.
Ed doesn't remember much of the last day of his father's life.
My dad was actually driving home from a Birdmen meeting after a long day at work, and they were driving on some back roads.
He was only 2 years old at the time.
And there was a small ditch out in the field, and the car nosed over, and he hit his head on the steering wheel, was killed instantly.
Major Edward Givens was 37, leaving behind his wife and 3 kids.
You'd think after 50 plus years it would get smaller, but the older you get, it actually gets bigger. You know, it's that hole in your life. You know, I never had a dad to play catch with. You know, I didn't have a dad to pitch baseballs to me or to teach me to fly.
Thankfully, Major Givens' other family wasn't too far away.
Across the street was Dr. Barry, who was the NASA doctor, if you will. This way was Neil Armstrong. Down the street was Charlie Duke, Jack Lausma, Michael Collins lived around the corner. I was so young when I lost my father. You look for role models, and that's what these guys were. They were true role models.
Givens says whenever his mom needed help, an Apollo team member was there.
They're going to call and see how you're doing. They're going to make sure you're making the grade. It was actually a little scary being a kid, because the expectation was set very high.
And as he grew up, the men who worked with his dad kept checking in.
And I called General Charlie Duke, Apollo 16 astronaut who walked on the moon, and I said, General Duke, could you come and speak to us? And he came and gave a 2-hour talk.
They've always been there when he needed them the most.
2 weeks ago, I got a letter from Colonel Lausma.
Even to this day.
Busy guys, you know, guys that are ambassadors for space, would take the time and they would check on me and come and see me, and I just, my heart is full because of the sacrifice and time they gave me.
The men famous for making that one small step possible really made a giant impression in a young man's life, and he hopes his role models will inspire another generation.
That was such a great time. It was a huge time of change in America, and I think the country really almost needs something like that every 50 years.
For Next, I'm Steve Steger.
Ed followed in his dad's footsteps for a time. He went to the Air Force Academy. Though instead of a career with NASA, he's been a pilot with Southwest for 26 years. Next, a sidewalk drive-through. If you're thinking sidewalk drive-thrus don't exist, you're right. And you're also curious about something I said in our scooter story. So I'll have an answer when we return with your feedback. I'm convinced some people think that every sidewalk is just a personal parking space reserved for them if they choose to cross a line. Like this driver in River Point at Oxford and Santa Fe, because make way, we're using the drive-through today. Yep, everything looks like a space to that guy or that woman. John Honegger sent this photo to us with the hashtag HeyNext. You can also email your photos to next@9news.com. Duncan was curious whether in Denver you're supposed to ride those e-scooters on the sidewalk or the street. All right, bike lanes are preferred. If that's not an option, you can be on the far right side of the road, but only if it's 30 miles per hour or less. If it's 30 miles per hour or more, you can go on the sidewalk. You're not supposed to go more than 6 miles per hour. And a note from Commando Patriot, who says it's clear you are not unbiased, leftist bias. Hope Commando refers to military service and not a lack of underpants.